To understand history, we first need to understand what historians mean by civilization. One of the best ways to define civilization is to strip it down to its essentials and identify the characteristics that all civilizations share. When we do this, several common traits become clear. The first defining characteristic of civilization is organization. Civilized societies require a high level of organization in order to accomplish the things that define them. Consider something as simple, but also as complex, as building large structures. Constructing big buildings requires far more than just physical labor. A society must gather raw materials, turn those materials into usable products, coordinate workers, and manage the entire building process from start to finish. That degree of coordination does not happen by accident. This organizational ability leads directly to a division of labor. Once a society begins building monumental structures, not everyone can spend their time hunting or farming. Instead, people specialize. Civilizations develop farmers, craftsmen, priests, doctors, scribes, administrators, and teachers. Each specialist performs a particular function that contributes to the survival and stability of the whole society. Specialization, in short, is a hallmark of civilized life. Closely related to organization is another key feature of civilization: permanent settlement and building. Civilized societies are builders. Instead of living in small, temporary shelters that move with herds, they settle in one place and construct permanent structures from wood, brick, or stone. Beyond family homes, they also build monumental architecture: temples, palaces, fortifications, city walls, and sometimes massive tombs. Projects of this scale require not only technical skill, but also the ability to mobilize and direct large numbers of people toward a common goal. Another important characteristic of civilization is metallurgy, or the ability to work with metal. It is no coincidence that the rise of civilization coincides with the end of the Stone Age and the beginning of the Bronze Age, followed later by the Iron Age. Civilizations learned how to smelt copper and tin to produce bronze, and later how to work iron. These metals allowed societies to create stronger tools, more effective weapons, and protective armor, advantages that set civilized societies apart from pre-civilized ones. Civilized societies are also producers, particularly of food. In fact, some scholars argue, somewhat simplistically, that civilization is nothing more than the ability to produce an agricultural surplus. While that definition is incomplete, it does point to something essential. Producing surplus food requires tools, organized labor, planning, and cooperation. More importantly, surplus food allows society to support specialists who do not directly produce food. Without surplus, civilization is impossible. Finally, civilizations are able to tell stories and keep records, especially through writing and art. They preserve knowledge, beliefs, values, and experiences in durable forms. Many civilizations produced monumental works of literature, particularly epic poetry. The Sumerians gave us the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Greeks produced the Iliad and the Odyssey, and the Romans wrote the Aeneid. In general, the more complex the civilization, the more complex the stories it is able to tell. Every civilization develops some method of record-keeping and storytelling. Although all civilizations share these characteristics, they do not all express them in the same way. This raises an important question. Why do civilizations behave so differently if they are doing many of the same things? Consider monumental architecture. We have already established that building large structures requires wealth, manpower, organization, and technical skill, none of which pre-civilized societies possess. When the ancient Egyptians acquired these capabilities, what did they choose to build? Massive tombs, most famously the pyramids. Modern Americans, by contrast, would never consider building such elaborate burial monuments. Perhaps the only figure in American history who might have warranted such a tomb was George Washington, and even he is buried at Mount Vernon rather than in the US Capitol. So, what do Americans build? Stadiums like the Superdome or AT&T Stadium, monuments like the Washington Monument, and even a pyramid in Las Vegas filled with slot machines. Civilizations build big structures, but their design, purpose, symbolism, and ownership vary dramatically. The same is true for nearly every other complex function of civilization. Civilizations act differently because each one has different ideas about what is important. These ideas are shaped by a society's worldview, its understanding of how the world works and what humanity's place within it is. Later in this course, we will compare the worldviews of the Sumerians and the Egyptians, and the differences will be striking. Civilizations also face different problems. Climate, geography, available resources, and internal cultural developments all present challenges that societies must solve. In addressing these challenges, civilizations develop particular ideas, techniques, institutions, and forms of organization. While they may be solving similar problems, such as food production, defense, and governance, they arrive at different solutions. Over time, this process produces distinct civilizations. The Sumerians and Egyptians, despite their geographic proximity, were very different societies. The same is true of the Greeks and the Romans. Now that we have explored what makes a civilization and why civilizations differ from one another, we can turn to another essential task: learning the language historians use to describe them. Part of becoming a professional in any field is learning its terminology. Every profession has its own basic vocabulary, medicine, law, psychology, and history included. While history allows for some flexibility in interpretation, meaningful discussion is impossible without working definitions. Before moving forward, we must be clear about what we mean by our terms. One of the most important terms in this course is Western civilization. To define it, it is often easiest to begin by explaining what it is not. In this course, Western does not refer to East Asia. We will not focus on civilizations such as China, India, or Japan, despite their importance, because they developed largely separate historical traditions. We also will not focus on sub-Saharan Africa. While civilizations did emerge there, they developed relatively late and had little direct influence on Europe or the Mediterranean world. We will, however, study Northern Africa, especially Egypt, because it was one of the earliest civilizations and played an important role in shaping the Mediterranean world. For the first half of this course, we also will not focus heavily on the Americas. Those civilizations will be addressed later. In short, Western civilization refers primarily to societies connected to Europe and the Mediterranean world, including parts of the Near East. That leaves us with the loaded and often misunderstood word civilization itself. Dictionaries tend to define it simply as an advanced or developed state of human society, but that definition is vague and unsatisfying. Historically, definitions of civilization have often reflected cultural prejudice. The ancient Greeks, for example, believed that anyone who was not Greek was a barbarian, a term derived from their belief that foreign languages sounded like meaningless bar noises. Over time, they grudgingly admitted that the Romans were civilized as well. We can, and should, do better than that. Rather than defining civilization by who belongs to it, historians define it by what it does. That more careful, comparative definition is what we will use as we continue our exploration of how human beings first created civilizations.